Well, let's do it.
Cold open?
Cold open. We're not really formal with like, welcome to.
I'm fine with that.
Well, pretty casual. Should be hopefully rather.
Welcome to the Hunt Hike Harvest. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we're off and running, but we're back for another episode. Today we have Henry Furgeson. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And my esteemed colleague, Jason.
I made it back.
Yeah. Even brought the right apparel today.
I did. Not wearing my fast gear.
But super cool. You and I have kind of been interesting, like start following each other on social media and come to find out you're a huge lacrosse fan. Your son Kyle plays, and both of you like to do a little hunting.
A little bit.
And so we've that's manifested into a lot of conversations. And so just a couple of quick things. You are a huge part of the Colorado Bowhunters Association. You're the chairman for them. We're going to talk a little bit about that. You're a pro staffer for Badlands. Talk a little bit about that. Idaho native. Is that correct?
Yeah. Boy, you dug that one up.
Right.
Your Wikipedia page is
that's right. Big Wikipedia.
Populated with lots of information.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe we'll even talk a little bit of lacrosse. So
I'm down.
Yeah. So
as long as you keep it on like a blue level for lacrosse.
Well, I'm just a dumb strength coach, so I don't get into a whole lot of X's and O's.
That's awesome.
But well, let's start with maybe just we'll go from the beginning and work our way forward. So obviously, growing up in a pretty outdoorsy state like Idaho, I'm sure that that introduced you into a lot of those type of activities. But
it did.
How was that progression for you? I mean, I think for a lot of us, like we pick up a bow and we're like, yeah, I think this is what I like doing. Like
it usually takes people about 2 shots with a bow. Yeah. First one, they usually smack the crap out of their forearm.
Right.
But then when they get that coached out of them, or they get an arm guard one or the other.
Right.
That second
learn
shot.
How to shoot right.
Exactly. When you see that arrow leave the bow and track like close to the target, oh my gosh, you can't beat that feeling.
Yeah.
And that's when people get hooked. And it's kind of funny because I was somebody who grew up never really aspiring to make things harder than they needed to be. So in other words, I always thought I would be a terrific rifle hunter and I'd just get to be a better shot with a gun, and that would be my progression.
Right.
And it was kind of funny how I had a friend who said, hey, we ought to try shooting bows. And, my mom told me to relentlessly follow the cool kids and what they said to do. So fortunately, my mom never listens to podcasts, so I can get away with it.
Yeah. That's fair.
But
we're going to email this one to her.
Exactly.
Hopefully she knows how to use email.
She knows people who do.
Okay.
Yeah. But I picked up a cheap bow in like 1987 and started trying to learn how to shoot a bow, and I kind of taught myself archery and all the bad habits that go along with it. But man, once you kind of figure out a few things to do right, then you can become a serviceable shot with a bow. And once I did, I mean, forget it. You could cancel the rest of the world as far as I was concerned, because all I wanted to do was shoot bows.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not really led me to much of a, making a living sort of aspect of it. But
I don't think many make
it's still a hobby.
No.
There's not many, and I'm honestly, I think I'm kind of glad for that, because I think you can take some of that passion and some of the joy out of it by monetizing it. For me, it's always been, there's been no mistake. Do I make my living doing that, or do I make my living at my actual job of, selling furniture wholesale? And there's no question. One of them costs me money, but brings me joy. And the other one makes me money and it allows me to do the other one.
Right,
But hey, they all have their goods, so even the job has its good moments.
You have a job for your hobby is what it is.
And that's exactly it. Yeah. And but the beauty of it is you don't get confused.
Right.
There's no, hey, I need to blog this or anything,
Right.
If I do or if I don't, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
So.
Well, I think it for us, like the interesting part was Jason and I, obviously our work side of our career side was how we kind of converged, and he was running his baseball business and I was running our sports performance, our training business, and they were slowly kind of merging where we had started creating programs that were synonymous with each other, where he was doing his side of it and I was trying to help his athletes in terms of, training and that type of thing. And then the common interest of hunting and all of that kind of came together. And for me, it was just this realization of I was spending all this time prepping every year to get ready for elk hunting and get ready for the fall and that type of thing. And it just kind of dawned on me that like what I'm doing for a living had some crossover into
it. Does. And it very much does.
And so that's kind of how we came to this. And I think we both kind of realized like, we may not ever make a living doing this, but I felt like what I do for a living, I have something I could actually give back to people.
And that's the cool thing about podcasts and things like this is that it's a service that you're providing, whether anybody's paying for it or even willing to pay for it. Right. Nobody really knows.
No one's going to pay for it.
Yeah. but you know what? The fact is there is knowledge that you can gain from listening to podcasts. I listen to podcasts all the time. And people are like, "Oh, what kind of podcast do you listen to?" I'm like, "Look, I'm not that complex. I listen to hunting podcasts, okay? Or podcasts about hunting."
Yeah.
And it's rather than turning on the radio and listening to what somebody else wants you to listen to, you get to listen to what you want to listen to.
Exactly. You control
and you can focus that attention into whatever avenue you want. Like,
100%.
I listen to hunting podcasts, baseball podcasts, and politics. Like, that's what I do.
See, and lost me there on the line.
Yeah. Same here. And so this is the beauty of listening to hunting podcasts for me. Rarely ever do they talk about politics. And that's what just makes it a nice little escape from like the reality of the rest of the world that we're in.
I just like hearing how bad everybody else has it, just to know how good that I've got it.
Well, you know what?
It's uplifting. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna go hunt and ignore everything you just told me.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I took in a previous life. We'll just call it pre-COVID. I used to travel a lot for work. So, I'd be overseas 2 to 3 times a year. And this, in 2019, I was actually able to take my family over there with me. And so I had a kind of an extended trip and I'm like, you know what, why don't we just pull this together and make it happen? I had a bunch of miles and stuff. So we just pulled it together and made it happen. Yeah. And it was kind of cool because you do see that you do have it pretty good. So what you were saying there, and and the beauty of it is after that trip, I came home and pretty much went right into antelope season. So, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But it's, it does give you perspective.
Yeah. There's a group in town that does a lot of work with veterans, and I got a chance to go over to Normandy for the 75th anniversary. And the towns that we were in northern France, they're just very simple. They're just farm people, right? Like they're farmers. They just want to, do their stuff on their farm, raise their animals, like very laid back, simple life. And it does put things into perspective when you live in a big city and you've got cars and high rises and all the other stuff going on. It just makes you feel a little bit more at ease that there's a simpler way to do things. And you don't have to always be in the hustle and bustle of the real world.
I think that's why I love hunting in general. For me, it's like I grew up in a small community and I moved here 20 years ago, and Denver was a lot different 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
And for me, not only just the enjoyment of hunting, but it's the escape from a lot of that.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, I was telling my wife this the other day, I'm like, the serenity and the silence and the quiet, and, just kind of escaping all of that, like, is just as good as anything. It's like the relief of being able to go like, phone is not working for the next week.
Excellent. We're just going to go ahead and shut that down.
Yeah. But then the sad reality hits you when you get back into service and you've got,
indeed.
100 text messages, 1,000 emails that go through. You're like, crap, this is going to take me a whole freaking week to catch up on.
It's going to take me 2 weeks to catch up from my week.
Yes, exactly. But it's a nice, relaxing week.
It is.
If you want to call, hunting is not exactly a relaxing adventure. It depends, yeah.
I don't know. I put a little. I think I might put a little more pressure on myself than most because I've had a few moments where I'm like, but it's kind of those calls to reality though too. Where you have those moments where if you're not having as much fun as you should be having out there, okay, maybe it's time to
Yeah.
look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, what's going on here? Why are you stressed doing the thing that you love?
For sure.
And
that usually happens on like day 6 or 7 when they haven't shot anything yet.
Exactly.
And Joel's had the realization that Joel's going to go home empty-handed again hits.
I'm telling you.
And it turns into sour pants. And
I think it's
you want to see a camp get packed real fast?
Yeah.
Don't shoot anything with Joel around.
Well, you're totally alone in that. Me, I take it like a champ.
Not
me at all.
Yeah, right. Every single tag that I have not filled is all stacked neatly in one pile.
Now, see, I wish I would have done that, and I could have covered your screen in tags before I finally got my first one. I could have done it. I could have, absolutely. And honestly, I should. The reason I wish I would have done that is I could look back and I could look at each of those tags as a lesson that I've learned. And I could guarantee you that I could look at each of those tags and tell you the specific lesson I learned. And because those things stay in your mind. I mean, listen, failure is a great teacher.
Sure.
I mean, it absolutely is. But you know what's an even better teacher? Success. And I mean, when you do, and the reason I say that is because I feel like all those unfilled tags lead you to a point. And they lead you to that point where you kind of figure out, okay, I've got a few things figured out here. And so when you're going into that next season, your confidence level's higher because you figured a few things out. And then I just kind of look at it as success begets success. So once you kind of get the ball rolling forward, it just kind of stays
Once
rolling.
you crack the seal, the floodgates open.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because like I said, I went years. I mean, all my friends and family, hey, did you get anything? Knowing the answer, you know.
So when the wife goes, I'm going out next year instead. I'm like, oh, buddy.
Yeah, let's try to keep
pump the brakes a little bit.
A little above the bell here, Jason. Come on now. No, I say that because my wife's had a lot of success hunting. I mean, she has the biggest elk in our family, and it's not
bragging
close.
rights.
It's not close. I mean, Kyle and I both have bulls, and I suppose if you put those two spikes together, glue those on, I'm probably in the ball game. I'm close. I'm close, but she's got the biggest elk in the family, and
that's great.
Hey, it's pretty cool, but there was a time where probably was a good idea for her. In fact, one of my favorite hunting stories. This is just kind of one of those examples of why you question whether you should actually have friends in your life. One of my best friends actually had pancreatic cancer and passed away in 2007. So that was a pretty tough deal. And his wife, I knew one of his goals in life was to get a good 4-point buck to hang on his wall at home. And he goes, I've got the perfect spot for it in our new house right above the fireplace. And so at his funeral, I told his wife, I said, I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to get that buck for you. And so one of my friends overheard that conversation, and he goes, hey, Henry, shouldn't you have offered Stacy services on that? She's got a way better percentage than you do. And hey, even though he had a great point, a very valid point, it still hurt. I mean,
there's a time and a place to rib you. A funeral may not be the best place to start that conversation.
With my mom, we would grow up. When I was growing up, we would go fishing, and I can remember, this time of year back home is big walleye spawn and stuff like that. And we would be trolling, and you're using bottom bouncers and stuff, and it's very finicky when you fish like that, to be able to tell the difference between nuance of what's going on,
a strike or just a bump.
And my mom's over there, got one, and I'm sitting there going
trying to make
trying to make a fish happen, and she's pulling them in left and right. Of course I'm young and I don't know any better.
Experience.
I'm just frustrated, how's she catching all the fish? And still to this day, last year, my dad sends me a picture. He's like, hey, look at the only fish we caught today. And she's got a 4-pound wiper that she caught. And I'm like, what'd you catch, Dad? Nothing.
My Mom's got the magic touch.
Yeah, kind of funny how some people just do, though. I mean, there are some people who are, I mean, archery and hunting and stuff in general, they're just killers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you could drop them in the middle of downtown Denver, they're going to come out with a 180-inch buck. And
right.
you're like, where did this how did this happen?
Yeah.
That's exactly
like our two hunting partners the same way. Like you show up like, oh, we just walked 10 miles, didn't see squat. And they're sitting in camp like, yeah, we got meat hanging in the tree over there, ran into one about 40 yards, stood still for us, put a nice shot on it, carried half of it back. I was like, you sons of bitches.
I've just never been that guy.
No,
I've always had to work for all of them that I've gotten. And I mean, that's cool. But, you know, it'd be kind of nice at some point. Yeah.
It makes it, when you get one, though, it makes you feel real special. Though.
It does.
Like, man, I worked my balls off.
They all mean something, you know,
sure.
and I mean, I got one the second to last day of the season several years ago. And I mean, I hunted my butt off that year. That was a rough, long year. But yeah, I mean, you walked out of that one and I mean, it had become a hard hunt. Mm-hmm. I mean, mentally as much as anything, I was just exhausted.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody feels like they're going to walk into the woods the first day, find the animal they want, put a good shot on it, and go sit in camp and drink beer the rest of the time.
I'd scouted all summer. I already knew that buck.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I got my chance, bunch of things happened, blew the shot, didn't kill him.
Yeah.
And so it took me, you know, like another 24 days to make that happen.
To get another opportunity.
Yeah. And you know what? But when I did, oh my gosh, man, it wasn't just a sense of relief. It was just this giant sense of accomplishment. Right. Oh my gosh. And it was a good lesson for me and for my son who was with me, but just staying with it, staying committed and stay the course no matter what. I mean, no matter how frustrating it gets. And
I think there's a big aspect of that, like the mental part of big game, big country hunts, right? Is it sure we joke about being lucky, every now and then, and some people have that, but at the same time, it's such a battle of will and fortitude and being like able to stay in that kind of mindset of like
being ready
tomorrow
always
might be the next day, right? Like no matter what happens today, tomorrow might be the next day, the next ridge, because you've seen it. And
how many times have we walked somewhere and like we're just heads down because we're going to a point on the map and then kicked up a bull or kicked up some cows or something like that, and you're like, shit, I wasn't paying attention.
I was hoping it was just me that happened to.
No,
it's a little better, but
last year,
we all have the same problems. Last year for sure, I remember it was day one. It was like noon. We're just walking in there and we're just walking this ridge and we were just really lackadaisical. And then boom, there was a bull 40, 50 yards from us.
Oh man.
And I was like, oh crap, that's an elk. Like I should probably knock an arrow at this point.
That's why we're
right. I wasn't expecting it, right? Like he pops up and I'm like, I think that's what we're shooting here.
Oh man.
Yeah. And then he actually stood still for a little bit and I knocked an arrow and I'm like, all right, let's do this. And then he ran down the hill, never to be seen again.
Yeah, circled down below us and just in a canopy of branches and just stared at us. And I'm like, yeah, that was
where you couldn't weave an arrow through that thing if your life depended on it. Yeah.
I wasn't chucking Hail Marys at that point.
Yeah.
So, and then oddly enough, we came back 2 weeks later and there were 2 cows within 20 yards of where he was.
Yeah.
Same spot.
Same spot. Yep.
I mean, it was.
We kicked them up on the way back. So we had already terrained the ridge going out, and we were coming back on that same ridge, just on a lower line, and busted them out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, have you guys figured out why they're there? Why that's?
I mean,
that hillside was covered with sign.
I think it was a good travel area.
Okay.
From. Where we think and where we had seen some elk that had gone through, it was, it's the right slope, afternoon, shaded, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And as you go through that ridge, it really flattens and then gives them access to water, which was down on the other side. And so all of the sign that we had seen in that day was, basically showing that path.
Gotcha.
And I think
it looked like it was just a highway going back and forth over this ridge. And
see, we've got a spot like that where I've bumped him a couple times, but I've never been able to figure out the when of it,
Mm-hmm.
and every time you go in there, it's just covered in sign. But I've only seen elk there a couple times, and it's just driving. And I don't.
It's one of those things where you're like,
I'm a
if I just sit here for the whole freaking day,
and that's
is something. And if you did it, nothing would show up.
Right.
The minute you turn your back, they'll go sit down.
And that's why I would never sit there.
Right.
Well,
it's Murphy's Law.
Last year we spent 3 afternoons where we're like, okay, every indication there was 2 water tanks at the bottom of this draw that was on where that hillside was.
Okay.
And then
it was literally the only water on our map for miles.
Forever. And we're like,
they've got to come down here.
Well, they're elk. They're big animals. They're not deer. They can't just get what they need from the plants.
We probably spent in 3 days like 12 hours sitting in that waiting. And we did see, of course, the one time we saw two different sets of elk that came through there, and of course we're on the wrong end of that draw, right? And so we watch and we cow call, and they kind of looked up. Yeah,
not today, man.
and boogie on, of course. So then we go, oh well, then let's sit on this end of it, and then nothing showed up for hours and hours and hours and hours. Like that's where they're traveling.
Yeah.
Murphy's Law.
It's tough, man. It's tough, and elk will drive you crazy like that. I mean, they're. They have patterns, but if it's their pattern can put them in the same area each day, not necessarily the same spot.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where, then if they feel pressured, they may just come in at 2 a.m.
Exactly.
And
that's,
hey, we were here. Where were you?
Yeah, exactly. So, but your passion is mule deer.
It is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love hunting mule deer.
What kind of fueled that for you? I mean, for me, it's elk. I grew up in huge whitetail country, and I never really got into. I was more of a bird hunter growing up, waterfowl and upland and stuff like that. And then when I got introduced to elk hunting with a friend of mine, his family, they guided on the south gate of Yellowstone his whole life, and I got kind of invited to an elk camp for the first time, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And that sucked me in. What was your kind of moment for that, as far as like what mule deer is on your side of that?
So I grew up in northern Arizona. That was kind of where I was when I got to be old enough to really think about starting hunting, and you couldn't get an elk tag, so that was
okay.
And some of the best things in life just don't change,
right?
And Arizona's tag distribution is one of them, and it's frustrating place to be able to try to start being an elk hunter. And I remember going out on my birthday, my senior year, I think. They started a good tradition for me, which was blowing off all responsibilities in life to go hunting on my birthday, because it's middle of September. So there's always archery season, easily done. So I blew off school, and I couldn't believe my mom signed off on that, but thanks, Mom.
Right. Yeah.
But I went out there, and I got a shot on a buck, and it was this was 1990. So, I mean, it was, the equipment wasn't quite what it was today. And we'll just say, thanks to my rangefinder, which literally was a dial, which you would turn until the images converge.
Yeah.
And they were wildly inconsistent. Wildly inconsistent. And I mean, to tell you how high tech this was, it did not have a battery. Did not have a battery. So anyway,
it's like one of those goggles with the spinning wheel. You just click it until it looks right.
Much. You just spun the knob until. And so anyway, it said 35 yards. I shot right over that thing. Or no, I shot right under him. And I'm like, that was not 35 yards. So I paced it off up to where my arrow was. It was 45 yards. I'm like, well, there you go. Yeah. So anyway,
close enough.
That day, it was really cool. Missed this nice 3-point buck. And then went to this other spot. Next spot I went to was, oh my gosh, I saw one of the biggest elk I've ever seen in my life. And so I actually had a friend who had drawn an archery elk tag, and their season started like 3 days later. He shot him. He scored like 380.
Wow.
Yeah. I was just glad to have like some little tiny part of a successful hunt for a big animal. But I'm not great at calling animals. I'm just not. I mean, it can be turkeys, elk. I'm like serviceable at calling elk.
Yeah.
Like if it's young and kind of not real smart, I might be able to call them in.
I like the not real smart elk. Those are the best.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite kinds. I mean, people are always, oh man, those spikes taste great. Yeah, they're also not real smart. That's why I've shot several spikes. But it has very little to do with that being the tastiest meat on the mountain. It's just more to do with, the intellect is not. Their ability to be elk and my ability to hunt elk just converge. Yeah. It's perfect.
Yeah.
But anyway, I kind of started, and I thought I was going to be an elk hunter. I just thought that was my destiny.
Yeah.
And then I hunted elk for a couple seasons, and I'm like, man, all these patterns, all these things I think I know about elk. I get out there and start hunting them, and I don't know anything about elk. But I kind of started figuring out you can just sneak in on deer. Yeah. You can see them from a long ways away, and if you don't totally screw stuff up, you can sneak in on a lot of deer.
Yeah.
And so I started kind of working on that and working on honing those skills, from really starting with glassing and learning how to find animals.
Right.
And I'm convinced that my biggest elk will come as a result of spot and stock.
Sure.
Or just wild irresponsibility on that elk's part.
Right.
One or the other, and most likely, since the big ones don't tend to make too many mistakes, it's probably going to be something that I sneak in on.
Yeah, we've had some. I can remember it took us an area that we've been into. Almost like six plus years to pattern an area where we,
it takes time.
Where we
it just does, yeah.
Where those elk are going to be. And even in that, like, there were 2 years in a row, like maybe the first and second year that you came along, where there was just a big growly, he just sounded like a massive bull, and we're all, down in this hole and elk are moving, and it's just like Houdini. We trounced through every place that, he had to be like right here. And never once did we ever see that bull, and you hear guys talk about
I find that very relatable.
And you just go like,
very relatable. He's
a ghost.
And we're, you follow it, you call, you try and get him to move. And I think that first year, that bull, remember that bull that Darby kind of cow called when I was down below?
Yeah.
And
when the cow snuck in on you?
Had a cow sneak in below me at like 20 yards. And it was like, I could hear her like tearing grass out of the ground. And I sat there and watched her. And of course, same thing as luck would have it. A fallen tree was in line with her entire body. So I got an either sex tag.
But you have no shot.
All I can see is her head going up and down and a little bit of her legs. And she's just hanging out. And I'm just leaning against a tree. How
far down does that femoral go?
But
I hit her in the knee. Can I catch up in time?
Yeah, but just on the other side of that, we had called a bull from a couple 100 yards, and he kept getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And I think what happened was we were just cow calling, and he was inching his way along, and he's at that breaking point. Same thing. And she turns and kind of walks back in his direction. And I think as soon as she walked back in his direction,
there went his interest level.
And he's like,
found exactly what he was looking for. Yeah.
And then that was the end of that.
That was my first year with you guys. That's what got me hooked on going out. Because they had been talking about, he comes back like, oh, elk camp, this is so awesome, this, that, and the other. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go buy a bow and I'm going to join you guys.
Yeah, and he did.
And I did. And that was my first experience was, hearing a bull elk, bugle from, I couldn't have been 40 or 50 yards away. And like just that reverb in your chest. And I'm like,
it's something else.
Like then the adrenaline starts get going. And I'm like, you know what? This is kind of cool. Yeah. And I had done some some rifle hunting up until that point, and obviously you can be a lot further away, but I hadn't had an encounter like that.
Well, and honestly, you don't tend to get encounters like that during rifle season, because of the cycle of the rut.
Right.
You're out there well after.
Right.
It. Yeah. Now this year's hunt was very different because for me, I tagged my buck. I think I got it September 11th. And so I had the rest of the season to go out and focus on elk.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of other stuff popping up and like work responsibilities, which I usually am extremely good at blowing those off during archery season.
As am I.
Well, I think I'm good at it. My people I work with think I'm just terrible at it, but
it works out good for us.
You know, I always tell people, because I give away a lot of jerky and like the sausage sticks. I give a ton of those away.
Yeah.
And every time I give them to my people I work with, I say, hey, if I'm ever hard to get a hold of, like August through November, just remember how good those taste.
I got a pack of those waiting for you.
Yeah, and then further remember, they aren't free.
Yes,
those things have to go. You have to go out and earn those things. And so I've got people to pretty good understanding on it. But it's interesting because I hunted this same spot in archery season for myself, and then later for my son and wife for rifle season. And I had one encounter in like 8 times into this one spot. One freaking encounter.
Yeah.
And I mean. And he bugled at me one time, and it was one of those, like you were saying, one of those that, I mean, the whole morning, it had been a ghost town. The only elk sounds you heard were coming from me.
Right.
But, you know, I've learned that this spot, it's a good travel route. And if I set up in there, I've been lucky there a couple times.
Right.
And so anyway, I'm doing the same thing, hoping for a little bit of luck to find me this morning. And, just literally over this hill, less than 100 yards away, this deep, thunderous roar of a bugle fires off. And I mean, and that was it.
Yeah.
He came in downwind of me, let out one monstrous bugle, and ghosted me.
Yeah.
That was the sum total of my entire elk experience right there in that spot that year.
Yeah.
But it's such a good spot. I keep going back.
Right.
So we're back in there like November 6th or something like that. It's like the last second or third to last day of second season. These elk are screaming in there.
Yeah.
Like 1st of November, and they're
that makes
going
sense
crazy.
because we didn't hear a single bugle for the month of September where we were at.
Gosh.
Because it was so hot.
So
the rut wasn't going. They were still bachelored out there.
That's frustrating.
We hunted
we hunted opening day through.
We hunted like 13 days of September last year.
Well, fortunately, that we did hear bugles, and that's how my son ultimately got his bull.
I feel like, just the way the weather's been in September's, and it's just been so warm that it just keeps pushing it further and further and further back. Where second rifle kind of used to be the popular, season to go out. I feel like third and fourth rifle are probably better now just because it's starting to get colder and that rut keeps getting pushed back.
I don't know.
I don't know if that's like
I think it depends. I think
physiological, but obviously the weather has just been bad the last couple of years.
One of the best places to monitor that is a place where elk are undisturbed, like an Estes kind of place, where regardless of the weather, they're going ballistic up there during those, prime time when they should be, when we expect them to.
Well, we had heard bugles 3 weeks before the opening day.
See, that's the frustrating part.
Because we were out scouting and we're like, is that a bugle that I hear? And it was like bugle. I'm like, it sounds like it's a whole damn herd down there.
Yeah, we got, and that was like 2 weeks before opening day, and we were on higher ground. Down in this like thick timbered area, and there were just cows mewing everywhere and start bugling.
That's so funny.
I told them to wait because we'd be back, and we go in their opening day, and
it was a ghost town.
Nothing there.
Yeah, they seldom listen to requests.
So it was
pleadings, and
it was worth a try. But so I follow your social media, and I think I've come to realize that I think you've reached a point with your mule deer process that's pretty selective, I would say.
I have guys who enjoy hunting with me, and other guys who think I should be shot right there with some of those deer.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've got a few good bucks on the wall, and I really am after something that just gets my heart rate elevated.
Is it size or uniqueness? Because
the answer to that is yes, but typically, I mean, everybody's like, hey, do you like hunting typicals or non-typicals. I'm like, I like hunting big deer.
Yeah.
But every once in a while you'll find one that's just so strange that you're just like, oh, I'd love to have that one. But
and I got to imagine, based on, and myself is in that present company, is that you probably get a lot of people that are like, where in the world are you finding all of these big deer?
Yeah, and I'll be real honest. I don't hunt a good mule deer spot. I hunt what used to be a good mule deer spot, and it's not.
Because they're all hanging on your wall.
I appreciate that. I don't think that's true. Because trust me, my biggest deer I've ever chased they're all dead, but not from me. And that's the part that keeps me up at night, trying to improve the process and find different ways of plotting and scheming, trying to come up with that next step. But the funny thing is, I've hunted, I scout a lot. I scout a lot during the summer, and I'm always looking for deer, looking for new spots, and looking for new wrinkles that I just haven't found before. And so really it's not, like I said, it's not that I'm hunting a good mule deer spot. It's that I've gotten good at finding and sorting through good to moderate bucks to find that one big buck to hunt.
Right.
And it used to be a lot easier. And I mean, you can say that statewide. That's true of anywhere in the state of Colorado right now. Yeah. 10 years ago, it was really easy to find a good buck. 10 years ago, I could go out and I'd have 4 or 5 different 180 plus inch bucks that I had, cataloged and were, semi scouted and knew which ones I wanted to go after.
Right.
And now I work my butt off to find a buck.
Right.
That might reach that threshold.
Are you of the type that says, if I don't find that buck, I'm just gonna, or as the season goes on, are you like, I'm gonna fill the tag? I
give in to peer pressure, and
that's good to know.
I'll be honest. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think social media is probably something I should shut my accounts down the night before the hunt, and then fire them back up once I get something dead. Because if I'm sitting in camp at night and if I've got coverage, or sitting there having lunch and I've got coverage, and
look at that one.
He got one. Yeah. He got one. Yeah. He got one.
Yeah, we do the same thing.
I'm like the only guy in the world who still has a deer tag.
Yeah. You feel like, how is this possible?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm like a week and a half, 2 weeks into the season, plenty of season left, and I am putting undue pressure on myself. And I go out and I will compromise. I'm the king of the 160 to 170 inch buck. Hey. That is if there's something that's going to be put on my tombstone, it's probably
right. Here lies a man.
Here lies Henry. He could have shot some really big deer if he didn't shoot all these
smaller ones.
Average deer. I don't even want to call them average. I mean, they're good bucks, but the fact is, there's always that next level buck out there, and I am of the opinion that there is a next level buck in every single unit in Colorado. Every unit. Yeah. You just need to know, you just need to put in the time to figure out where they are, and then finding out where they are is only step one of like a 200 step, like a 200 piece puzzle. I mean, that's nice, but that's just that first little corner.
Finding them's the easy part, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out how to get them is the hard part.
Yeah. And again, like I just said, finding them's not as easy as it used to be either. Yeah, so the easiest part isn't even that easy anymore.
And like to follow up on that, and this, I'm sure that there's some truth to this with all species, but I don't know, did you see that? They just did a research study that got released in Utah.
Yes, I did. The one about them going on to private land during season.
And how...
Man, talk about validating all of our fears.
and basically what
might as well said the boogeyman was real too.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at that and you go, well, any of your notions or theories about, things with habits of animals, and then at the same time, their ability to have this kind of like internal clock where it's like their calendar is set. Almost.
So the funny thing is, I have always I'm going to go back to that weird deer that I shot with Kyle the second to last day of the season. Okay, so I shot that deer second to last day of the season because I'd been hunting a giant leading up to that. And I kind of mentioned that earlier, but that big buck, I thought that was going to be the easiest deer I ever killed.
Yeah.
I was sure of it. And the reason is because he was a loner. I mean, the most deer I ever, you always see these big pictures of the big bachelor herds in the summer.
Yeah.
He was not that guy. Every time I saw that deer, I saw him either alone, and 2 times I saw him with another buck. And it was always the same buck.
Yeah.
So these 2 or nobody.
Yeah.
Opening day of the season, I spotted him. He was one of 13 deer. And I'm like, bro, you had this in your calendar too. I see what's
He's like, I'll just hide in here and we'll play Where's Waldo.
Yeah. You will never convince me.
That's okay.
Never convince me that they don't have calendars. That I don't know where they keep them. Because I've cut a few of them up, and I've never found the calendars that they keep, or cell phones, or
I got sort of like
something.
A good friend of mine back in Nebraska. He's a bow hunting nut, tree stand hunting for whitetail, and he sits right where the South Platte and the North Platte, like he hunts ground where both rivers, where they split.
Gotcha.
And he does so much, work in the off season that he has basically classified deer by which river they run, like by how
very cool,
like how they look, their horn makeup and everything.
Oh, that's a North Platte buck. That's a South Platte buck. That's really cool.
So he picks out a deer. This is
I aspire to that kind of stuff. That's awesome.
This is years and years ago. This was back in probably the late 90s, and he had a buck that he'd picked out, and he had patterned this buck. He shows up here. He goes here. He runs. When he crosses through here, he goes on this side of this. So of course day comes out, and he had seen this buck, and there was a hayfield that was next to river ground, and he goes up to sit where that was at, and he's like, that buck crossed on this side of that haystack like 10 times in a row, never, like always on that
always side. On this side.
He shows up on opening day. Which side do you think that deer went on?
Of course, the other side.
The other side.
Naturally.
So, and then this is the best part.
Because he had a calendar too.
So you want to talk about like Elmer Fudd in this deal. So he creeps and manages to put a stalk on it, gets to the other side of this haystack, like a full, big haystack.
Yeah.
And the buck is standing opposite of him. And he's going, what am I going to do? So he ends up pulling out his buck knife, and he throws it over the top of the stack and draws and waits. And he ends up, buck walks out like,
that's
that?
awesome.
And he ends up shooting it. But like,
I've tried stuff like that, but mine never ever have that same ending.
No,
I sent a warning shot at a deer once, and it got him up and moved, and I was able to get him. But that's that kind of stuff for me, man. That
would never happen for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, never happened for me. So, well, let's talk a little CBA. So,
sure.
Obviously, love so much of what CBA does. Him and I have talked a lot about, needing to get more involved, right? And,
you've come to the right place.
Yes, right. And you're doing the job. And you guys just had your annual event not too long ago.
Of course, we had our banquet in March.
I was out of town, of course, with my work responsibilities, and missed it. But obviously, we'll hope to make that. But I know you guys hold a ton of things. Let's just talk a little bit about, for maybe those that aren't listening, what the CBA is.
Sure.
And the mission, and I know you guys have a ton of things that are always going on and stuff that you support. Let's talk a little bit about that.
So the events are a big thing for us. They're a big draw for us. But really, we have our banquet, which we held in March every year. Then we hold we have a Kings Canyon shoot up kind of out of Walden that's actually happening like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I saw that on the calendar today.
Yeah, and so then we've got we've got really 2 big events we do every year, the banquet, and then our second one is the Jamboree. And the Jamboree is a 50-plus year tradition that we've had. That's up around Twin Lakes, just out of Leadville.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that'll be the third weekend in July, and it's an awesome event. I mean, there's like 6 3D courses set up.
Oh, wow.
You pay a one-time fee, and you go out and you shoot as many arrows as you can all weekend.
That's awesome.
Lots of fun, a lot of camping up there, some cool activities in the evening and stuff. But those are kind of the glitz and glamour of what we do. Right. What we really do behind is the work behind the scenes. That like this year and it's funny, I say we've been working our butts off this year. There's always somebody working their butts off on this. And that's the cool thing, is that this is, the history of the organization goes back to 1969. Yep. And really the CBA has been instrumental from the very start in getting bow hunting only seasons in Colorado. So one of the really cool things that we've been a part of. And now the struggles always seem like they're really individual to your moment that you're working in. Like earlier this year, there was a proposal for bowhunters to wear blaze orange during archery, the muzzleloader archery overlap. And we successfully got that shot down. Yeah. And, you're feeling like you're on top of the world, like, man, we just did something big. Right. And then you look back to the history of the organization, and that's been done 2 other times leading up to this. And so, okay, it's still big. Every victory is big. Sure. And that's the cool thing. And every defeat is even bigger, unfortunately, and so you've got to kind of keep that, a little bit of that cornerback mentality of moving forward and keeping that short memory. Right. But one of the big things that we just did, and these are the kind of things that we really hang our hats on. Our legislative liaison got wind of a bill that was coming up early this year, to allow hunter's education to be taught in schools from 7th grade and higher. So the sponsor of the bill, he approached him and he says, hey, I think we could help each other here. Right. And so he did. And he took his 2 sons down with him, and they testified at the Capitol 3 different times. Yeah. Was so instrumental in it that the boys actually signed the bill with the governor when this was signed into law. Yeah, cool. So it's a cool thing. And these are the kind of things that we are actively engaged in always. Yeah. So whether it's with the legislature, or last week I went down to Woodland Park, and spent actually Wednesday and Thursday down there. I spent Wednesday afternoon and Thursday until about noon, at the SAG meeting, which is the Stakeholders Advisory Group, which they literally get people from every organization in the state. Some of them animal rights activists, some of them, like the lady who runs the wolf refuge down in Divide. Mm-hmm. So and then you've got hunters, outfitters, cattle ranchers, sheep ranchers, all these different groups are represented on this big collective. Right. And so the cool thing about it is each one of them has the thing that is special to them, and they represent that group as a whole to the whole state. Yeah. So it was kind of cool because this one is talking about the wolf reintroduction. It's done. We lost the battle. It was close, but we did lose. It literally couldn't have been much closer. I mean,
3/10 of a, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was less than 8,000 votes, if I remember right. And if you figure a state of 6 million people, that's pretty phenomenal. Yeah. But yeah, it was literally less than 3/10 of a polling. Yeah. So they were talking about the different steps that need to happen in this along the way, and what happens when there's hazing that's required. What is acceptable hazing? Yep. At what point is the hazing deemed ineffective and lethal means need to be brought in. Right. So that was a big part of what they were discussing last week. And so I went down and I spoke on behalf of the Bowhunters in Colorado to this committee and in their 45-minute public comment section. And we all had 3 minutes. And I mean, they're not messing around. When they tell you it's 3 minutes, I'm not somebody who does well reading a talk, reading a presentation. But this one was so important that I got up there and I'm like, hey, look, I'll have 5 or 6 bullet points, and I'll speak beyond that. But it was a fluid situation, and as things were being discussed in the days leading up to it, we adjusted, my remarks heavily, and so. But I spoke out on that, and those are the kind of things that we're always involved with, and working with the wildlife commissioners, and just making sure that the bow hunters have a voice in Colorado, and that.
Do you ever talk with CPW about like season dates, open dates, or like one of the things that's always confused me is muzzleloader right in the middle of archery season, right? They're wearing orange, we're not. Obviously, last year there was a tragic event. A muzzleloader shot an archer, and I guess
out of state.
And I guess in years past, muzzleloaders used to have their own season separate of. So bow hunters, is that am I
and I believe,
speaking correctly on that?
Correct in saying that.
And now they overlap.
They've overlapped since like 1985.
Right.
So I mean, this is not new. This is 35 years of history of these seasons being, kind of meshed together.
Yeah.
And hey, it's probably not ideal. First time you have an animal bumped by somebody wearing orange, oh man, it's all muzzleloaders. It's and it's easy for us to look back at it, at this 35,000 foot view, and assign a blame on something like that. But truth be told, the encounters and the negative encounters have been very limited over the years, and we've been told.
I just don't like them out there.
No, and hey, you know what? I'll be honest. I don't like anybody else out there.
No, I agree, 100%.
And I think that's just my own inner elitism.
Sure.
That
sure. I think everybody's that way.
Yeah, I mean, look, all I personally need. I just need a month to myself out there. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all. That's all.
It's not too much to ask.
It doesn't seem like it. No. I mean,
that was us last year, though. We drew an elk season last year, and we literally did not see one hunter.
Oh, that's awesome!
It was the whole time, and we were in like 3 different spots looking for elk and didn't run across a soul.
And it's almost like traveling back in time when you get an experience like that.
Well, like we were talking about earlier, the peace and serenity. We had it last year, sitting at camp, like not a soul in the world.
And let's be honest, you'll aspire to get that again at some point in your lives, and it's not easily done because, like you said, you have to draw that tag to get to that point.
Even as an evolution of talking about archery, even for me, my first elk hunt was during rifle season, and I got really disenchanted with the amount of people that we always were fighting against, and then you add in obviously
it becomes a competition. It becomes a safety issue. It becomes a lot of things. And really the interesting thing is, as we look at these, here's the biggest challenge that we face as bow hunters. Every time these surveys come out from CPW and they ask, did you feel overcrowded? We answer yes way too often. And yes, we do feel overcrowded, but they are going to look for solutions to that.
Right.
Okay. And those solutions are pretty predictable. It's a reduction of tags to reduce the number of people out there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, hey, it could be that we lose our over-the-counter tags. That could happen in our state. It could happen not just to bow hunters, and it may start with bow hunters and then go over to rifle hunters. But I think it's a mindset thing. And that's what I've kind of come to realize, is that it's a little bit of a mindset, because as bow hunters, we've kind of taken to bow hunting for different reasons, but a lot of it is to escape that hustle and bustle of rifle season. Yes. And a lot of the rifle guys are just comfortable with it. It's just what it is. It's just their reality. And you just work.
There's nothing worse though. Like I think the year before I went archery hunting with you guys, you came rifle hunting with me I think we were up in 12. Yeah. And I remember we spent all morning getting back to this point. Yeah. And then sure enough, we come over this ridge and here comes,
outfitters.
Yeah. Johnny Two-Ton sitting on his horse, with 7 horses behind him, walking up this place that we spent all morning getting to. He
expended all of his energy in saddling horses.
And the horse was expending a lot more energy than he was.
Wrecked after having gotten all the way back in
I had been in there, and I'm telling you, if we want to find out, we've got to get out to here.
Yeah.
And so we start hiking, and we looked at maps. I'm like, we're almost there. We get into this like last big clearing before there's one more ridge. I'm like, we're almost there.
Yeah.
And we look down, and here through the bottom is just
just put the goggles on, going, oh crap!
And it's honestly, it's just demoralizing.
It's deflating. I was like, we spent all morning getting to this point.
It was like a
so here's the interesting thing is we have looked at. You look at, and I mean, hey, we all read Cameron Haynes' book. It's not the new one. I haven't gotten that, but his first, his backcountry bow hunting.
Yeah,
it was right there in the title. You need to get farther away from the roads.
100%.
Well, everybody else has read that book too, guys.
Yeah,
and
we
now,
know the place that we go, like in years past, it was like maybe one or two people back there, and then a couple years ago, we were back there, and there was like 25 dudes back there.
Switch, man.
All from like Minnesota, North Dakota, or something like that, out of state or something. Like, how the hell did you figure out how to get back here?
That's the question I ask every non-resident person I run into. Like, hey, how'd you find this spot?
Yeah.
And, I mean, hey, look, obviously I'm here already.
Yeah.
You're not divulging anything, but I'm always curious. Hey, how did you find my spot?
Sure.
and that's a place I said it took us like 6 years to pattern.
Yeah.
And we figured out that in order to get where we finally found elk and we started seeing them consistently, it was about 8 to 9 miles in.
Good gosh.
And so then our thing was like, we got to figure out how to get down here, because what we were doing was we were essentially taking an hour a day just to get down in there, and an hour a day to get back out of that spot, just to get to where you started.
And I mean, the amount of energy expended in those 2 hours are crazy. They literally compromise the rest of your day.
Oh,
I mean, they do. They just do.
Well, you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning to drive for an hour. Yeah.
To all of that. Yeah. I mean, you've got options. You can either go back in there before the season, start packing in supplies and setting up a base camp for yourself closer to there, or find somewhere else. Or continue to get 2 spectacular rounds of cardio every day.
Really embrace the suck of all of it.
It's all they're all options. Yeah. They're all options.
That's right.
But it's really become hunting has changed so much over just the last few years. And I think 5 years from now, we're going to look back at right now and say, oh my gosh, hunting has changed so much over these last 5 years.
Yeah.
Now, whether it's for the positive or the negative.
I was going to ask, how do you see the differences? Obviously, I haven't been hunting nearly as long as Joel has or you, but what have you seen that's changed from 10 years ago to what it's today? And then what does it look like 10 years from now?
So right now, I think we're at the peak of information. Yeah. And there's just so many people, whether it's podcasts or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of information being shared out there, and it shortens people's learning curves to an extent. And I mean, it can be a very effective tool to shorten that learning curve, but you still need that experience on the ground. You still need that experience of being, right on the fringe of a herd of elk and going, oh my gosh, I've got an hour before they bed down. What do I do during that hour? And then once they bed down, what do I do?
Right.
So I mean, there's these on the ground decisions that you have to learn on your own. But I think what's going to be interesting, and because there's no questioning the fact that we saw a significant spike in hunter numbers since COVID. Yeah. Over the last 2 years, it's the reality of it. Yeah. And there's people, in the places that you used to be able to drive out and park your truck every time and throw up a tent, knowing that you had your spot. It was your favorite spot. Well, you know what? That's somebody else's favorite spot now too.
Just on a different day or a different week.
Yep. And really, we've become. I think one of the positives from this is it could help people become more connected with nature and more connected with, their own food source if they're able to find some success. But truthfully, we don't necessarily benefit from that. I mean, it's in large part we do, but to some extent, hey, that's your spot. and that's you now have to go out and start expanding your search.
Yeah.
And I've had to do the same. I mean, I've had places I've hunted for years that all of a sudden there's other people there.
Yeah.
And no matter how hard you try to keep these places a secret, it just shows that you need to constantly be evolving your own game, your own skill set, and your own tool belt. So you've got a maximum number of tools that you can draw from when it comes time and you're out there and all of a sudden I've been on this buck all summer myself. I have not seen anybody else out here, and I've been out here a lot. All of a sudden, opening day, somebody else is in your spot, and like, oh crap.
Yeah, he came on a Tuesday and thought the same
now
thing.
What? Yeah, exactly. I'm a Saturday scouter. He's a Sunday scouter. And,
right.
Never did we cross over, but and it's always tough because maybe 8 to 9 miles back isn't the answer. Maybe it's 6. Maybe those outfitters are back in there and they're pressuring the elk and and you're walking right past them in the dark.
It's like we talked about that. We're passing elk to find elk.
Right.
And that's the thing. And there's one of my favorite quotes is don't leave elk to find elk. Yeah, if you're on them, stay the hell on them. Right. I mean, stay on them. Yeah. And whether it's we've had the elk we hunt travel on a giant travel pattern, big loop, and when you're on them, man, we know that we've got, hey, it's today and tomorrow. Yeah. And we need to make something happen. Otherwise, we need to start hitting the high points and figuring out where they are on the loop and hoping to get over there and make something happen. But, sometimes in the loop, they're out in the open. Sometimes they're in the trees, and you can't glass them.
10 years from now, if you were to look back or put your crystal ball in front of you, where do you think we are as hunters, as bow hunters? Do you think it's something that the state is going to do to limit tags? Do you think they're going to limit out-of-state tags? Are they going to increase the price of tags?
I do.
That sounds like a
marriage. I mean, are those solutions that you guys propose to legislature to say, hey?
We have not, but we most definitely will have an opinion on it when it comes to that point, because there's already discussions happening about reducing OTC tags. Yeah. So
it's coming.
It's basically unlimited, right? Like the state just will sell you a tag. Anybody who walks into a Cabela's or Bass Pro or Walmart, you can buy an out-of-stater can buy a $600 tag and go to the woods and try and find an elk.
It's a tremendous revenue stream.
100% it is.
And you can't argue with that. I'm not saying they're doing it out of greed, but I'm saying that they're doing it to meet the ends meet the needs, and the means meet the ends. But the bottom line is, it may be sustainable, but if it is continuing to be an OTC, I envision personally, again, you asked for my crystal ball here, I think tag prices are going to continue to go up for residents, and I think they should.
Yeah, and I told people that myself. I'm like, I'm okay if they make my tag $50 or however much.
If it's $100 for an elk tag, sign me up.
Right, as long as
it means the world to me to be able to go out and hunt them.
And I would be okay with it as long as I knew that they weren't just going to give an unlimited amount of tags to everybody else, right? If I had to, as a resident, said
you want to see an improvement in quality,
correct,
to go in kind with that, and you know what? I think we're all well within our rights to expect that.
Like I would expect to pay more if I knew that the quality was going to be there. Now, earlier you were talking about pre or post COVID, there's more and more people, more and more hunters in the outdoors,
and it's not just hunters; it's just people.
Well, and obviously we saw they have to buy the fishing license to go into the state wildlife areas and all that stuff. But what I want to see is, I'm losing my train of thought here. If those people that came into the outdoors, they came into hunting or just being outdoors, right? And then they start seeing all these floods of people. Now they realize hunting's not exactly what I thought it was, right? Then do you see that drop off? And then what does that drop off look like?
And that's a great question. I do think there's going to be some leveling off there. I don't know that it's going to fall off dramatically unless.
I'll keep my eyes peeled on Craigslist for gear and stuff that comes up because people
going out of archery sales are my favorite.
Right.
I've gotten some great deals on those.
But I mean, I feel like as many people came into the sport or just came into hunting in general and fishing and all those things, and then they go, you know what, life is kind of back to normal again. I don't really like doing this. I don't have time to do this. My life has changed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey,
then they get out of it. Right. But now we're paying, that balance. Like, I'm sure there's some model for that.
The way I see it working really is, even if there's a couple scenarios. First of all, let's say they just pull the OTC tags and make it
all draw.
It's all draw.
Sure.
So it's a way, from a management perspective, I think it's way better for the state. I think every hunter in the state, every elk hunter in the state within 5 years would see a dramatically improved experience, because what they would do is they would be able to control how many people go to each place, that spot. Yeah. So
then your tag necessarily wouldn't be good for just, it would have to be good just for that unit.
So you mentioned Unit 12 earlier. Yeah. It's the only reason I will ever say a unit number on a podcast.
Right.
But let's just say Unit 12. Hey, Unit 12, instead of being OTC, is now going to have 2,500 tags. And it'll be Unit 12, 13,
I feel like
15. And
12, I think they're like 12, and the surrounding ones are like the most popular.
Well, that's what.
Yeah, I mean, like that's
yeah.
Right.
Hey, it's the.
But you're saying we're going to, instead of 10,000 tags for this unit or these units, we're only going to give 5,000 tags.
And so as a result, you would instantly see within a few years of better recruitment from calves and stuff.
Sure.
And less, spikes getting shot or, raghorns getting shot. You would see it, ideally, an improvement in quality.
Right.
So what that would do, though, it doesn't necessarily even mean it has to be a great reduction in tags. What it means is they will, instead of allowing, let's just say 15,000 people to converge on that series of units.
Right.
Now there's going to be like 2,500 or 3,000.
Right.
And the rest of them are going to get distributed throughout the rest of the state.
Sure.
So you'll see some less popular units now become real popular. Mm-hmm. And really, I think it's a better management tool, long term. Right. It wouldn't, again, I'm not calling for a reduction in hunter opportunity by any stretch, because I mean, hey, I've got a 16-year-old son. I want that kid to be able to hunt every year. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't hunt next year, he's still going to love hunting, but he may not love it quite as much, because he'll fill that time with something else. Right. And I do feel that it is important for us to maintain opportunities, as many as possible.
Right. For sure.
So one other way of being able to possibly do this is an over-the-counter with caps. So, and you could cap a couple of different things on that. So there's a lot of talk right now about how there's more non-residents than residents in over-the-counter archery. And you know why there's talk about that? Because the numbers back it up. There legitimately are more than, and I mean, the amount of unlimited, OTC archery tags that we sell in this state is pretty crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's 50, it's over 50,000. Yep. So Colorado's easy because you don't have to apply for a tag. So somebody from Tennessee who's coming out for I've been dreaming about it for years. I'm going elk hunting. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what's the first state they're going to hit that has elk as they're driving out? It's Colorado. What's the first state that they hit that they can grab over the counter elk tags? It's Colorado. Right. They don't have to learn our draw system. They don't. And I mean, just the mandate to draw a tag would reduce
it. Right.
Numbers. Yeah. Now, again, with that reduction, the CPW still has to operate. They have a budget that they have to that they need to be able to operate. So there would be an increase in. This would likely coincide with an increase in resident tag dollars. Has
there been any biology studies or CPW studies that if we did limit the number of people, I mean, obviously it makes sense in rationality, but do they have studies that say, hey, if we just limit the number of people here, the quality of the animal in this unit improves?
So right now, I guarantee there are those studies available. And that's the beauty of it's a state-run organization. So there is an Open Records Act. You can get any of those studies. You have access to them. But one of the things that right now, the transition to getting to this next step, they've already closed down and made, I shouldn't say closed down, it's not the right way of phrasing it. They made the southwest corner of the state draw units. And then last year, a couple areas in the San Luis Valley, because again, these guys who are driving up from the south, that's their first big mountains they see, and it's gorgeous there. Who wouldn't want to hunt there?
Right.
And they all do. And so it's become real crowded, and there's been enough overcrowding talk that one this year became a draw unit. So as they take two big chunks that were very popular before and make those draw units. So now let's say Joel has 5 elk points. Okay, so you can draw either of these as a first choice. But you know what happens with your points if you draw that as a first choice is you now have zero points next year. Now, chances are you can draw this year in and year out with 0 points because there's a lot of tags available. But as they do this, as they reduce these, as they take 2 more big popular places out of the OTC pool, they shove all those OTC guys into the remaining units. And it's getting harder and harder to find a quality hunt in that. And so that's the biggest challenge. And honestly, CPW has their hands full in making this decision. And
it's a moving target.
And no matter what they do, somebody's going to get...
Someone's always going to feel totally wronged
Yeah. And as long as it's not me, it's fine.
Well, and then,
at least you're honest.
Obviously, I don't think we get too far into the weeds, but you talk about looking into the future. We all know as hunters, and kind of mentioning a little bit with the wolf piece that's going to happen.
Great unknown,
that is going to cause change. There's no doubt about it. And
we can look to the north and see the examples of it. It will change the hunt if nothing else.
For sure.
I'm not prepared to say it's going to decimate herds just yet, because I do think that through this SAG process that there's going to be a good management plan in place. And that's my hope anyway. Yeah. And I do feel that there will be, but man, no matter how it shakes out, some herds are going to be affected. Yeah. I mean, if we look at the numbers, the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is almost moose free now. Right. And that's sad, especially for a guy who once again didn't draw moose.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's been talked about on some other podcasts and some big names in the hunting industry that say, the management plan part of it is great, and you can put that into place. But then those activist groups come in and they start challenging it. So once you reach those management levels, they just litigate for years and years and years, and now those management levels are double or triple what they should have been.
And that's the
hard part is once you get to that point, is how do you keep them from doing that?
So I told you when I spoke at the SAG meeting last week that I encouraged them to put in very clear and concise wording talking about what happens when they reach those objectives.
Yeah. Right.
And because, I mean, you don't have to look any farther than the Yellowstone Grizzlies, which they did open a hunt for 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, they had drawn tags, taken people's money, and I think it was just days before the hunt started that they pulled the plug and said, "Nope, sorry, we can't do it because of those lawsuits."
I mean, they talked about what they did up in Idaho. They did it in Montana. They did it in Wyoming. It's like it's inevitable that it happens here unless there is some very clear and concise, like, you cannot challenge this once it reaches that point.
As much as I'd love to think that just nailing this down at the beginning prevents that,
it doesn't.
I don't think
I don't trust any of those people.
I don't. Well, and hey, they're as passionate 100% on their side as we are on our side, and that's the disturbing thing, because I mean, hey, they know exactly what it takes to. Now they've got a playbook.
Yeah, they've got a blueprint.
They know how to get past that.
It's like taking the best player from a Super Bowl team and then bringing him over to another team,
like a Tom Brady.
Yeah,
and then he comes over and wins the first year at his new spot.
Success is created.
Exactly.
Let's move you over here and plug and play, replicate.
And it's such an interesting thing, and I'm under no illusions that we will not face that here. I mean, it's not just that we live in Colorado, which is, swung pretty aggressively to the left in ideology and thinking, but simply because we're such an important state, and this is a state that everybody views these as life or death causes, and it's hard.
Yeah, I think the hardest part with that whole conversation is, us as outdoorsmen and wanting to protect and conserve the ability for us to have, our right to hunt and those types of things continue for future generations, like you said, with your son and beyond that, right? And then at the same time, I think, I look at it and go, well, you can think of that as being selfish to some level, but I think more so like growing up in a very agricultural community, and I look at the people that are going to be so daily and directly affected, your ranchers and those people. And I just, I think that's the hardest part of that conversation is like the compassion that you have for those people that are now going to be, in the trenches of like you said, what is going to be considered hazing, and what are going to be my rights, and these types of things for people that's livelihood on a daily basis are going to be potentially, altered, and how they're going to have to deal with it. I'm the hunter who, I don't want them to kill and decimate the deer and elk and moose.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that I can still go do what I like to do.
Yeah.
But guess what? It's not.
They have to eat.
Yeah.
And that's what they eat largely is,
So it's going to be a challenge. We've heard some interesting stuff. We talked to a guy that lives outside of Jackson Hole, and we kind of said, well, what's your thoughts? And we were kind of like drawn back by his response, because he goes, well, the reality of it is I think that over the time of when things learn to, kind of settle into the present,
they find their level there.
I think the quality of the elk are better. Wow.
What? Yeah. That's very interesting.
And he goes, because in order for evolution to happen, then once
the strong shall survive, so to speak. Right. Well, that's interesting.
And so I was kind of like, well, how long does that take?
Yeah, man, no kidding. I hope like crazy he's right.
Yeah, I hope he is.
Because one way or the other, they're coming. They'll be on the ground. The first pack will be on the ground by the end of 2023.
Yeah. Well, and we're already seeing just from natural
migration. They're already coming down out of Wyoming.
They are most definitely here. I mean, we've seen it already early this year.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder how much that will continue over the next year and a half before we get there. But we will soon find out.
So. That's right.
Yep.
But we want to make sure that folks, number one, know how to find you.
It's real hard.
It's real hard.
Yeah. Big Chief Wackabuck on
maybe the best Instagram handle that I know of. How did you come upon that? Let me ask you that real quick.
Well, I'm 1/16th Cherokee.
There you
go. I know I'm like the only one in the country who is. So it's just me and like four of my cousins, But
okay, that's awesome.
Just a series of dumb jokes that evolved into that. So
your moniker.
That's it.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
I totally came up with that and changed it one day because I had a name that was too similar to a friend of mine's, and I'm like, can't have that. So I'm not kidding. We were driving through Highlands Ranch. I told my wife, I said, I've got to change my Instagram name. I don't know what it should be.
Right.
And she goes, just go with Big Chief Wackabuck. And I'm not kidding. We driving down the road, and she changed my Instagram handle that day, like a year into Instagram for me, and that's it. So
I love the fact that you also. Your son is Little Chief
Wackabuck,
yeah,
and I love that.
It's a family piece.
It is, and I'll tell you what, if that little turd shoots a bigger deer than me one more time, I'm probably just going to have to take. I apply for all his tags,
right?
So I mean, I can affect this a little bit.
That's right.
I like to think so, but.
And I'm sure you're fitting the bill. So
you bet I am. You bet I am.
So, and then obviously we want to make sure we'll provide all the connectivity for CBA, Colorado Bowhunters Association.
Awesome. Yeah.
Something that get out and support it, right? I mean, some of the things that you guys are doing, $30 a year, right? Membership.
Yep, and it's going up to $40 on June 20th, I believe. So
Perfect.
yeah, and hey,
inflation's hitting.
You can blame inflation, and you can also blame the fact that we have not raised our fees in almost 20 years.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, we've got a big new magazine that we're doing, and you know it's not free. I mean, we've got advertisers, but it's a big tangible benefit, and it's something that we're getting a lot of good feedback on that from people. So we're going to, we could reduce the number of pages in that, but we don't want to do it. We want to keep the value at a maximum there.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, we didn't get to lacrosse. I wanted to talk about your bow fishing trip too.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we will table that and we'll have to have you come back.
Always available. Always available. It's never a struggle to get me to come talk about hunting. I can tell you that.
Well, we like to try and make sure we find reasons. That's why we built this space, and I'm like, this gives us a
very cool space here. By the way, I love this.
Meet and invite people and get an opportunity to learn more about them and just share.
Have good conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Cool. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll provide you with all the connectivity on the back end in the show notes and all that. Make sure that you know how to get a hold of Henry, know how to get a hold of and be a part of the CBA. And good luck this season. I'm sure we'll see you before that. I know we're going to see you next weekend.
Absolutely. You will.
Pretty big lacrosse game we got.
That's right. Here,
so,
can't wait.
So that's going to be exciting too. So
heck yeah.
it. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm never gonna look back, 'cause damn, I was built to last. You move slow and I move fast.